Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us today, and welcome to today's webinar. This is part 2 of our Getting Back to Work series, and today's discussion is going to be network focused. I'm Dennis Walker. I wear a couple different hats at IntegraONE. I'm the director of our recruiting offering. I'm the office manager for our Fort Washington office, and I'm also an account manager. Let's jump into what we're going to focus on today. So today's discussion is going to include network, security, and managed services. So preparing your network for the increased load, managing and bringing the devices back to your network, and then we're going to open up the floor to questions in the second part of the webinar. If while our engineers are talking and you think of something or you have a question, please use the chat function on the right side of your screen to submit that question, and we will address it the second part of the webinar. Let's introduce today's presenters or panel. So Brad Reitmeyer is with us today. He's the VP of Service Operations. He's been with IntegraONE for 6 years, and Brad provides the strategic and operational leadership to our pre-sales and technical delivery teams. Thanks for joining, Brad. Al Kale is our security practice manager. Al's been with IntegraONE for 4 years. He is a certified ethical hacker and certified security analyst. Thanks for joining us, Al. And Joe Consolmagno is the head of our managed service offering. Joe's been with us for 4 years also and has 10 years of experience in the managed services space. Thank you, Joe. So a quick review of what our topics are going to look like today. And I think, Brad, we want to start with you. And let's discuss this preparing your network for the increased load. So accounting for the increased load on your networks and internet connections as assets come back to the office.
Right. So, I mean, we're not going to be increasing the amount of people or assets we have behind our firewalls and in our networks, but these assets have been remote for a while. There could be items that need to be synchronized, updated, data moved on and off these assets, things that have been in the field that haven't been patched from an OS level, from an application level. They may be reaching out to internal resources. They may be reaching out to external resources. The point is we need to be ready as those assets come back in to accommodate those changes from today's norm to tomorrow's norm in traffic patterns.
So for these devices, when they come back and they need to be updated, how should companies handle? So maybe you've got, you could have 50 devices out there, you could have 100 devices out there. How should they handle the updating, and kind of getting everybody back on the network?
Sure. Different companies have different methods for keeping their assets updated. Some maybe have internal resources that are taking care of that from Microsoft or other providers. Some may be allowing the assets to reach out to the internet directly. The idea is that you want to understand how you're doing that, when you're doing that, the amount of devices that are going to be being updated, and where from. Important things go first, security updates. Things that are less important, functional, operational, last. Stagger them out. Make sure you're monitoring your bandwidth and your utilization, and perhaps be pacing those things or moving those updates onto less critical circuits if you have SD-WAN, or preparing those servers for the increased load if you're in a VM environment, maybe adding more memory, more CPU, to make sure they can accommodate the updates across the network.
So is there a way, Joe, this is probably for you. So these devices, they went out, we set everybody up, it kind of went out in the wild. Is there a way for a company to say, we want to make sure that everybody is up to date even while they're remote? There's a solution for something like that, so they don't have to worry about, all right, everybody comes back, now we got to start, bringing their laptops back up to date where they need to be. So there a solution that exists to help companies with that?
Yeah, so essentially any good managed service provider isn't going to rely on WSUS to patch their endpoints. They're going to have tools that are going to be installed on desktops, servers, mobile devices, etc., that are going to rely on different applications to be able to access what's current from Microsoft, what's available from Adobe, Java, etc., and begin to bring those devices up to date. So as customers left the environment and they worked from home, they were no longer protected by a VPN or whatever, firewall, and they may not have been on a VPN, etc. So whether they're at a Holiday Inn or that they're at a Cracker Barrel, whatever the case may be, those machines should be checking in and saying, hey, I'm missing Microsoft patches for 2 weeks. There's a feature update available. There's a Java exploit that's out. I need to get that updated. The end users probably aren't thinking about that. That's when you're relying on software. So managed service providers typically provide that type of stuff, and so can we.
Okay, good. That would probably save a lot of work for the IT team when all these people come back.
Yeah, correct.
Brad, can you talk a little bit about updating your core networking, your secure SD-WAN, wireless switching, routing as well?
Sure. Again, a lot of us have been out in the field. We haven't been in our offices, in our networks. A lot of our customers are delaying maintenance, either that we're providing or they're providing internally. So we have all these devices that may not be exactly up to date and ready for us to come back. They may have vulnerabilities which are security related. They may have vulnerabilities which are operation related or functionally related. And we're going to be stressing them out a little bit. We're going to be putting in some increased load. We're going to be bringing assets back that may not exactly be as secure as they were when they left the network. So we want to make sure, looking at our perimeter and working inbound, that our devices have the latest updates on them, whether they're automatic updates to features and databases, whether they're OS updates for patching of the operational or security functions of the edge firewall, and working back to our core routing, same type of methodology, and on our core switching, and of course the wireless controllers and wireless access points where we're providing the majority of our connectivity internally today. Again, just making sure they're ready and prepared because, one, there's been nobody in there really doing that work for the most part. Two, a lot of the work has been delayed because you can't get on-prem, or you have a lack of guts to interrupt that production service while everybody's remote, which most people are taking a conservative viewpoint on that.
Great, thanks. So it strikes me as not a technical guy, right? It strikes me that the biggest risk companies are looking at really are the endpoint devices. So what's going on with those today while they're at home, if people aren't constantly connected to VPN, which I'm sure they're not. So Al, if you think about managing and bringing these remote devices back to the network, can you do kind of a deeper dive into, again, migrating them back, but then something that was brought to my attention, which I think is interesting, and maybe not everyone's thinking about, but mitigating the risk of newly installed applications that somebody may have downloaded, didn't know they downloaded for a reason. Can you talk about some of those things?
Sure, absolutely. Like Brad was saying, right? What's the status of the device as they return? What's the visibility? Do you have visibility into the asset? Do you know what's installed on it? What kind of vulnerabilities exist? Who primarily used the device? I mean, I don't know about you, but my daughter loves those baby shark videos, right? So, on one hand, I'm using it for work-related items. On the other hand, every once in a while, we're watching some videos. So, again, who's been using the devices? You really don't know if you don't have that visibility. That kind of ties into a vulnerability management strategy, right? What's on the asset, the vulnerabilities that are detected, how do we prioritize and how do we patch them and remediate them? If that wasn't in place, we can talk about it further, but, they all they go hand in hand. So, before the cows come home, let's flatten the curve now, right? What can we do proactively before the devices connect, to the corporate network again? As far as the application goes, same thing, right? You got to have visibility. You have to have a method of managing those applications, right? So if we don't know what's installed, we don't know what's returning. So it's kind of like a building block approach, right? One foot in front of the other.
So it would seem to me that, gosh, I hope everyone was prepared when everyone went home. And if they weren't, there's certainly this risk out there of us coming back to work and then being sent back home after a certain amount of time, maybe quarantined again, who knows. But clearly it's just as important as these devices go out that they're set up to come back. So reduce your workload when they do come back. Al, thoughts about quarantining networks to protect these devices from your primary network when they come back?
Sure. Yeah, same topic. Considering the risk of the assets returning, if whether or not we have visibility, as they reconnect to the network, something we like to implement using network access control solutions are quarantine networks. So we'll set up policies that automatically place a vulnerable endpoint into a quarantine zone or a separate isolated network. That way we can perform the remediation and the patching again before they connect to corporate resources. If NAC isn't an option or it's not in place today, there's no reason why you couldn't spin up your own manual quarantine network. This way we can kind of place the devices in that pool as we remediate, and then allow them full network resources.
So another thing that actually does interest me, so reviewing policies, people went home, we kind of changed some security policies on their devices, security profiles. What do they have to think about as people come back to their environment and any changes they've made and kind of resetting there?
Sure. This is a common topic. So, when the pandemic hit, things moved quickly. A lot of changes were made. A lot of people we talked to, there's holes poked through the firewall. We did what we had to because we're sending a user home that doesn't typically work from home. And now they need to connect to internal resources, right? So I might have, RDP exposed to the internet right now because, those users have to connect to a terminal server in order to, perform functions. Moving forward, we need to make sure that we review those policies that were open, very thoroughly. We need to get that perimeter secure.
What about in the situation we're looking at right now where we start opening up a little bit more, where people are allowed to go back to work, but half the company can go back in, half the company's working remotely, that other half then goes in the next week, this half is, so you've got people in different situations who need different access. What do you do in a case like that?
Right. Okay. Yeah. So on one hand, people are still working remotely. Employees are returning back to the office. We still need that level of access yet, or those holes in the firewall. Maybe reassess the situation. What was done to address it, very quickly. Moving forward, is there something better we can do or implement, right? So if RDP was exposed for somebody to connect to a server, can we put multi-factor authentication to further improve the security, right? This way we can leave it open while adding additional layers of security on top.
Okay, thanks. And then Joe, I want to circle back to you to talk about the managed service, what a managed service offering can provide from a standpoint of comfort to companies when we're in this situation, if we're in this situation again, if more people are starting to work from home in general. So as far as protection layers on your network, what can managed services offer to people?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we bring is a consistent approach. So what we saw with a lot of companies as they started to transfer people back to home and they had one IT guy maybe supporting 50 users, 80 users, whatever, is there's certain check boxes of things weren't getting done because they were scrambling, trying to get users converted over to different equipment so they could take it home or remote in or whatever the case may be. So what we bring as a managed service provider is consistency. So one phone number to call, email address. We can scale greatly with the IT person that's on site. We can work with them, making sure that they're getting certain things done. Are the backups being checked? Have your network devices had a backup? One of our tools does that. And also, what's happening on site? So if there's nobody sitting on site, who's looking at seeing if there's anything going off in the closet? We've gotten calls where somebody's come on site and they've walked around their IT environment and they call us and said, "Hey, the UPS here is beeping. Can you help me take a look into it?" If we have a managed service provider in there, you're going to have that layer of eyes on that. So we can make sure that there's no great degradation happening on your servers, backups are happening, a switch didn't die in your closet, or whatever the case may be. So to sum it all up, consistency. So making sure that things are happening on a timely manner, and that your office can move remotely, come back in the office, and things are going to be taken care of.
Great. If I put you guys on the spot here, who wants to sort of do a general recap? Here are the things everybody needs to think about as we slowly bring employees back to the office. Anybody want to take that?
I'll take it. So, I mean, in general, summing it up from the network and security perspective, is your network ready to accept those systems coming back, both from an operational perspective, in other words, the bandwidth, the readiness, the ability to provide the functionality, and then from the security perspective, are things up to date? Is the perimeter secure as it was when you left? Again, because these devices may come back in any shape or form, you really don't know. You want to get them connected, you want to get them updated, but while they're doing that, you want to make sure your network is still being appropriately secured. Do you have the information about these assets, about how they were being used in the field, whether, like I was speaking to, the visibility, what's been installed, what's been authorized, what's been not authorized, as you bring them back and get them updated and sanitized? Were there anything done in your network as an exception, as a last-minute way to fix something, as an ability to get your remote users up and running? Were they done the best practices, or were they just implemented as an emergency change? Go back and review those, make sure you didn't inadvertently create a problem for your users when they come back that you used to solve the problem while they were remote. I'll also mention looking at those services which you were using remotely and may continue to use remotely, because we may not all be fully back in the next couple of months or so, and adding extra layers of security on them, whether that's two-factor or some other layer of authorization and analytics. Reaching out to your partners and your tool sets and your companies you're working with, and seeing how you can leverage what you may already have in place to get things up to date and monitored and managed again.
Great. Thanks, Brad. I know you guys weren't ready for that one. So I think that's kind of what we have today. And Kat, I believe you're on with us still. Kat Tuttle, our marketing and communications manager.
I am. Hopefully you all can see me now. Hello, I'm the woman behind the curtain here. So I want to thank our presenters for taking us through kind of that overview. And I suppose, Dennis, we're ready to kick it off with the Q&A portion of the webinar, right?
Please, yep.
Okay, perfect. So as Dennis mentioned earlier, on your GoToWebinar toolbar that should appear at the right-hand side of your screen, you have the chat box. There's also a questions function. Either one of those is just fine to use, and you can go ahead and type your questions in to our panel of presenters. So I'm going to go ahead and start reading these off. Gentlemen, you can feel free to jump in. Whoever feels like it might be more in their wheelhouse can take the question. So the first question we have here, Okay. The question is, should laptops returning to the office be sandboxed while a full system scan runs?
I'll take that one. I'm sorry. I'm just looking for the questions here in the panel. I'm sorry. Should systems be sandboxed while, say that last part again real quick?
Sure. Should laptops returning to the office be sandboxed while a full system scan runs?
I believe so. You know, we spoke a little bit about quarantine networks, but let's talk about staging areas or, you know, an isolated environment, right? Because that's essentially what the sandbox would be. You know, if your corporate resources all reside on VLAN X, let's make sure these devices have zero access to it, right? Until we've actually scanned, sanitized, and validated that the machines are clean. Absolutely. You know, sandbox environment, staging environment, you know, let's do everything we can to make sure that we're not accepting unnecessary risk when the devices return, you know, back to work.
Great, thanks, Al. So shifting gears here a little bit, I'm just synthesizing kind of a common question here. Could anyone speak a little bit to promoting collaboration with those who are not back on site versus those who are? So I think this speaks to collaboration tools.
I'm not sure. You want me to tackle that one, Brad? Yeah.
Yeah, that's not in my wheelhouse.
So, I'm sorry, repeat it again for me, please, Kat. Promoting collaboration.
Between those who are in the office and those who might still be at home. So referring to any collaboration tools that are available to help with that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm assuming like remote video collaboration tools, you know, WebEx and of the sort. Yeah, absolutely promote them. Communication is key, so you definitely want to keep it open, regardless of where the employees reside. You know, not every application is created equal. We might get into that a little bit today. But yeah, absolutely promote it.
You know, the one thing we did internally at Integra was to reiterate those applications in an official communication, what they are, how you access them, what they can do for you. We did that as our workforce started transitioning primarily remote. Same methodology could be used again as your workforce starts transitioning back from remote to office.
Great, thank you both for that. Actually, Brad, sticking in that vein, and this is just a question from me, myself, and I, but I know internally at IntegraONE, Brad, you did send out some internal communications to kind of get folks up and running. I think that might be something to kind of walk through on the line here. So just what was initially communicated out to staff and kind of what are those next communications that we foresee getting from you as we think about transitioning back to our office work?
Sure. I mean, we took a look at, like I said, what applications do we use as a business, not necessarily as a technology provider, but as a business to run our business day to day, and how do we access them? We consolidated all this into a document. We circulated it with smart guys in the organization for updates, included screenshots, and we republished that to the entire organization. So everybody had a sort of quick reference guide on how do I access my email, how do I access my collab tools, how do I access you know, accounting packages or time management system, CRMs, things like that, just so everybody had a very up-to-date current version of it. We also added some functionality within those tools regarding consolidating sign-on, usernames, and passwords. We did add a layer of two-factor authentication for some of our more critical users, particularly on VPN and sometimes on email, just to make sure that those were extra secure during this period of time. That sort of coincided with the project itself of doing that and the timeline, but we focused on those areas which provided exposure. We provided some literature on what it means to be remote, in particular to our service offerings. When our customers require us to be on site, what does that mean? What do we need to do? Who should be approving that? So again, just not only just the technical side of it, but the business operational side of it, of how we are to be working as an organization in a remote situation. And then we'll reiterate those things again, and somewhat in reverse, reminding people what should be used when they're in the office, how to access the office, what to do when you're in there. And then again, I think as we brought up previously, how we continue to collaborate with people who are remote and people who are in the office, which actually is our common normal business.
Right. True. Thanks, Brad. Yeah, I'll look forward to seeing those emails, I'm sure, as we kind of move back to the office. I want to continue in this vein. Actually, we have a few questions that kind of touch on this topic. So I'm guessing this one is a little bit more AL oriented, a little bit more security focused. So just looking at some of these collaboration tools, the question is why, or I suppose whether, apps like Zoom can be less secure than professional grade, solutions like WebEx or Teams.
Yeah, I saw that one pop up in the chat window. So very controversial topic right now, right? Zoom is taking a lot of heat, and rightfully so. I mean, they had a good service. I think they jumped from 10 million to 200 million users, maybe even higher, 300 million. But unfortunately, it was littered with security flaws. So, that's a huge thing. Privacy is a real concern nowadays. So that's why I was indicating earlier, not every application is created equal, right? So definitely want to, choose a good platform and do a little research, before you make the move. Me personally, I saw in the chat window, I don't use Microsoft Teams. I have heard good things about it, same with Skype. Personally, we use a lot of GoToMeeting and WebEx. So I can't comment on them specifically. I know a lot of organizations do use them. Unfortunately, right now, Zoom is probably not the best choice. So I would avoid that, like the, like the pandemic going on. Yeah.
Not all applications are created equal.
Sure.
Gotcha. Great, thank you, Al. Moving, I guess, along to another topic here. Another VPN-oriented question. So what do you recommend regarding VPN connections to the primary office? Full tunneling versus split tunneling.
Right. So this comes down to oh, sorry.
Good.
Take it away, Brad.
All right. Yeah, I think, Al, you're going to go with a little bit of personal preference. Being in the finance and banking industry for a long time, it was really mandated. So I look at it two different ways. Your operational guys who are worried about bandwidth and efficiency are going to tell you split tunnel. Your security and audit guys who are worried about how the organization is secured and meeting audit requirements are going to call and tell you full tunnel. IntegraONE operates in split tunnel, just so you know, because of these operational efficiencies, and we have other security measures. Full tunnel gives you a lot more security because you can apply your security policies to all the traffic that the client is generating. So sometimes it's very advantageous for full tunnel to maintain good security on the client, make sure people aren't downloading things they shouldn't be, accessing things they shouldn't be. And if they are, when they're offline, when they come back online and you have the right equipment in place, you should be able to see that, detect it, and react to it. So a lot of times I'll recommend full tunneling from a security perspective, but it really has to be taken a look at.
And Brad took the words out of my mouth. It comes down to personal preference or security policy, right? Either one of those is going to dictate, how you implement the VPN. Tight security, absolutely full tunnel. You need insight of that traffic and control as opposed to, split tunneling if the policy is a little relaxed. Now, split tunneling, if you have endpoint protection on the client, right, that performs other functions, maybe you can get away with split tunneling to keep that traffic local while still enforcing the security policy beyond the perimeter. So kind of a loaded loaded question and topic there.
Gotcha. Perfect. I'm going to bounce around a little bit. We got a few other kind of topics here. I think this is probably also an Al question. The question is about tools that may be available to look at device updates beyond Windows Update.
Okay. Yeah, a couple different ways to skin a cat. We've got on-prem solutions, we've got cloud-based solutions, we've got managed service solutions. You know, that's been the common theme in a lot of these topics here. You know, managed services, we leverage the Fusion 1 tool set, you know, so you get device visibility no matter where the client resides. You know, the patch, the OS status, you know, pushing those patches out. You know, outside of managed services in our offerings, I'm a firm believer in Qualys cloud platform. Again, it doesn't matter where the client resides. I have device visibility. It's always reporting to the cloud. I can push patches. I can see the device vulnerabilities. I can prioritize them. I can really build an effective, you know, vulnerability management, patch management program, you know, around that solution. You know, and then the on-prem stuff, WSUS, you know, different services that you can spin up.
Thanks, Al. Joe, since your name was invoked there, managed services was invoked, I actually have a specific managed services question for you. So the question is, has the crisis changed or amended our team's approach to monthly network admin checklists?
Yeah, so we had to make an adjustment there. Normally when we do a managed services package with one of our customers, we're coming on site on a routine basis, once a month, twice a month, sometimes weekly. What we did is we just, as counties got worse, we started to transfer those to remote network admin visits. So we just changed our checklist. Typically it's fill up anywhere between a 4 and 8 hour day. We changed our checklist to look at other things as well as what we usually look at. Are backups happening? How's the space on the servers? Virtualizing a couple backups, so making sure that consistency still happened with our customers, and if they needed to do anything on site, make changes, have those things available and ready for them to take place.
Great. Perfect. Moving right along. Here's a question that might be for Brad or for Al. The question is, doesn't FortiGate handle the security policies in a split tunnel situation?
Does the FortiGate handle the security policies in a split tunnel? So by split tunneling, we're specifying what traffic we do want to encrypt and come back through the FortiGate, and the remaining traffic keep local. Normally, you know, non-corporate internet traffic. So that would reside completely on the local network at the client location. So in a sense, yes and no. The FortiGate handles the encrypted traffic. The non-encrypted internet traffic, it would not.
If you have the full version of the Forti client, though, like you were alluding to earlier, Al, yes, the local Forti client can be configured to analyze the traffic regardless of where it's being sent. But again, the FortiGate itself is only going to analyze the traffic that flows through it and control that traffic. Anything outside, it doesn't have visibility to, unless you have the full Forti client and it's configured properly.
Great. This seems like a general, excuse me, general curiosity question. So I suppose maybe this would be for Joe. Without naming an organization, what types of security threats has Integra witnessed that can be attributed to the situation?
I'd hand that back to Brad now. They look into our systems there.
What situation? COVID-19?
Yeah, I would think the crisis overall.
In all honesty, I don't have to name clients because I really haven't, knock on wood, I haven't spoke to a client that was actually went through a compromise, during the pandemic. Now, that being said, there are a lot of scams out there, a lot of COVID-19 related, websites are being spun up daily. I'm reading about phishing campaigns. I'm, kind of spreading that awareness out, to users, customers, employees, internal colleagues, because we need to be aware of the danger. And maybe that's why they haven't fallen victim to it, right? Security never sleeps. I mean, attackers are going to try to capitalize on this as much as possible. So we definitely want to make sure we're aware of the dangers, but not to run in circles. I actually haven't run into a customer situation yet.
Not that I would.
I'll take that back. I misunderstood the question at the beginning. So one thing that we've seen over the last month here or so, is a lot of spam and phishing happening to our users. And one product that we have that tackles that is Barracuda Sentinel. So what that'll do is it'll look at O365 users in O365 and see if things are not happening that are not what the user usually does. So it puts AI into your O365 environment and studies people's emails, when they usually send emails, and if they're not supposed to be sending emails at certain times. So for example, like at 2 a.m. in the morning, if an email hits the president of the company asking for a check number or something along those lines, that'll just get flagged and be sent directly over to us because it's not normal what that user is doing. Or if they're logging in from different areas. Normally this user's logging in from Pennsylvania, they're logging in from California at 8 o'clock at night. That's not normal behavior. So the sum it all up, we've seen a growing interest in this product because some weird emails have been going out to our users, and we've been looking at it and saying, hey, if you want to protect against this, install this product and get it from us. And we've seen that traction increase over the last 60 days.
Got it. Another looks like a security focused question. So what vulnerability scan program do you recommend after employees return?
Yeah, so me personally, for an on-prem scanner, I'm a fan of Nessus, which is a Tenable product. I'm also a fan of Qualys, the cloud platform. Now that would have a virtual scanner, that could communicate back up to the cloud. I'd ask what's in place today. What's the budget? What are you looking to do? Do you want to just perform one-time scans and manage the vulnerabilities as a manual process, or would you rather automate some of it, right? That's going to kind of lead me down, different paths. Like I said earlier during the webinar, building out an effective vulnerability management program, not just one-time scanning, but how do we actually, manage them day to day? Now, on the Qualys side of the house, for typical assets that are, laptop servers, whether Microsoft, Unix, Mac, whatever the case may be, we don't even implement a vulnerability scanner itself. We actually use a lightweight agent that reports the inventory and the vulnerabilities up to the cloud. So they're constantly being scanned, every hour. And not only do you get the vulnerabilities, but you get the prioritization, right? So if an asset has a vulnerability that exists and there's a public exploit running in the wild, you can actually see that on the console, right? So now you can build out a plan. Okay, these guys have to be patched first. This is critical, priority. On the flip side, if a vulnerability exists on a machine, but it's a local privilege authentication that an attacker already has to be on the machine, that's lower down on the totem pole, right? So all depends on what you're trying to accomplish there with the scanner. But for a traditional vulnerability scanner, I am a fan of Nessus Professional.
Great, thanks, Al.
Sure.
So folks, you can keep those questions coming in through the chat or through the questions section. I want to thank everybody who has submitted their questions so far. I would like to, while we're kind of letting that marinate a little bit, ask a few general questions to the guys. So one thing that we heard in a previous webinar was a question about skill sets. So looking forward to the future and potential crises that could come up, what are going to be those skill sets that we've learned are now, even more valuable or sought after?
Rock, paper, scissors. I'll chime in. I'm sorry, Kat. Could you repeat it a little bit? I wasn't sure.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So what would be the most sought after skill sets now that we've been through this, as we're looking forward to, potential future crises? What are teams going to need to beef up on, so to speak?
So for me personally, I think it's organization specific, right? You have to look back and what did we learn? After the pandemic, what happened? What did we do, during, and what should we do after to ensure that we're protected in the future, right? So the skill set, what kind of trickles down or follows along with that? Do we have to beef up on security? Are employees going to continue working from home? Do we have to accommodate for that? I think that it could be a different use case per the organization. I hate to be very general with an answer, but I think it would change,
Depending. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Perfect. And another sort of general question here, folks. So this crisis versus any other crisis that might come up, natural disaster, or, pick what you will. Is there such a thing as a crisis management checklist that, you can kind of create to address things in the future, or is it more case by case?
Yeah, so go ahead.
Generally when planning, you're looking at everything as a business resumption plan or a disaster recovery plan. And yeah, there are those exact same checklists which apply to a crisis. What's different here is duration. So where we typically look at a DR, business resumption being the short end of it. We're looking at, hey, we have an event that happened, it cleared up in 3 days, we need to get back online. Typically, we're not planning on losing 100% of our fixed assets, right? So all of our businesses being closed, all of our buildings being closed, our supply chain being disrupted for months, right? So I think you can apply those same tactics in this particular situation. You just have to think about it over a longer period of time. A lot of people had VPN capacity issues at the beginning of this. We didn't have enough licenses because we weren't planning on having 100% of our staff working remote. I think, going forward here, people are going to have to consider that as a potential that they're going to have to accommodate for a full capacity remote work staff, or at least the required capacity to keep the business running. So again, I think there is a checklist. It's in your DR plan. It's in your business resumption plan. But if you don't have one, there are plenty of templates out there that you can start with, and those exact same practices apply regardless. Even some of the SANS top 20 things apply regardless because of security measures for remote work staff to be prepared for disasters regardless of how they come, how they appear.
Gotcha. Thanks, Alan, Brad. Another question that's come through here. Guys, in your opinion, if Cisco AMP and Umbrella on the Endpoint Protect, would you be comfortable deploying split tunneling?
Again, what's your security policy, right? Or what's your preference? Would you rather have that traffic remain local, the internet traffic? If that's the case, let's layer on security, right? If it's not enforced through, policy, procedure, compliance reasons, and you can utilize split tunneling, then yeah, by all means, but you definitely want to layer on that security. So, with Cisco AMP and Umbrella, that's exactly what we're doing. We're pushing the security features down to the endpoint, right? So we want to block malicious websites using Umbrella. if something does get onto the device, we want to make sure it's safe and protected with AMP. You know, that's exactly what we're doing. We're planning for worst case scenario because we want to utilize split tunneling because it makes the most sense for our organization.
In general, advanced endpoint control is something that everybody should be looking at. It's not just enough to have an AV, commodity AV client on there, or a simple AV client. You have to look at it from the full endpoint protection and remediation perspective. Do I have control of a local firewall? Do I have control of a local web filter? Can I detect command and control? Can I report that information back to a central repository for analytics? Can I follow up on it after there is a perceived breach? Can I mitigate that breach by isolation or remediation after it's there? So in generally speaking, with remote work staff, tools like AMP and Umbrella, again from Cisco, there's products from various other manufacturers that provide the same level of protection. Yeah, absolutely desired, especially with primary remote work staff.
Right, great point. You know, going back to the Baby Shark video, right? You know, at one point we're watching Baby Shark. One day my daughter is going to get on this laptop. So if I don't know any better and I have no idea what's going on at the time, right? What's getting onto the laptop as it's sitting there unprotected? Now, me personally, it's locked as soon as I leave the room. That's a hypothetical situation, but could it happen to anyone? Absolutely. So the more, you know, advanced endpoint security on that asset, the better, regardless of split tunneling. So that's a great point there, Brad.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. Al, I'm going to be singing Baby Shark all day. Thank you for that.
I love that video.
Here's a specific question here, maybe for Brad. So the question is, has network performance from providers and carriers, AT&T and the like, impacted wireless networks, SD-WAN?
You know, on the business level, so when we take a look at it from a dedicated internet access or a business provider circuit, I haven't seen too much. Now, of course, people have been asking about capacity. They've been talking to their carriers and increasing capacity, and performance has typically been there. Now, the reverse side of that, I've seen a lot of. So on the commodity side, on the people that are, you know, using the VPN at their homes or wherever, yeah, the impact has been pretty substantial, depending on who you talk to, and depending on what region you're in. Even, you know, as local as saying, hey, am I in northern Pennsylvania or central Pennsylvania or eastern? Where am I? Definitely been some impact there. So while we haven't seen too much of it on the backbone layer, I mean, it's there, but it's not as impactful. We've seen it a lot on the user commodity layer. And those companies which are using commodity internet connections, you know, have seen it, but typically they're paired with a dedicated internet connection or a business connection. So they're just shifting traffic around if they have that ability. But yeah, definitely there on the commodity side, not so much on the dedicated side.
Gotcha. Thanks, Brad. So folks, it looks like those are the questions we have at the moment. I'm going to go ahead and sort of do our housekeeping and wrap up here, but certainly the question box and the chat box remain open. So if, as I'm doing that, anything pops in your mind, do feel free to still send those in. All right, hopefully everyone can see my screen here. So first things first, we will be sending out a post-webinar survey, the purpose of which is just to get your feedback on what you heard today, what was helpful, what you may have liked to hear more about, and also, you know, did any questions come to mind even after the fact? You can feel free to send those along through the survey, and we'll make sure that the guys get them and can respond. Also, if you have any just general inquiries for IntegraONE after the fact, a couple ways to reach out to us. You can certainly get in touch with your IntegraONE account manager, or you can head to our website, so www.integraone.com, and go to our contact page. Next, as Dennis mentioned, this was part 2 of a series that we're doing on getting back to work, getting back to the office. So part 1 of that series was a little bit more data center focused. It included Joe and Al, so managed services perspective and a security perspective. And then Jim Beddix, who is our director of server storage, would be speaking to that data center information. So we're hosting a second live round of that webinar this Friday, May 8th from noon to 1. So if you missed it the first time around, you have one more chance to join in. Also, and it's not on the slide here, but if you enjoyed today's webinar, which is part 2 of the series on networking, and you'd like to recommend it to a colleague or a friend, this part 2 of the webinar series will be hosted again next Wednesday. That's the 13th. If you want any more information about any of that or other events that we may have coming up in the future, you can head on over to IntegraONE.com/events. All right. That's it from us today. I want to say a big thank you to everyone who's on the line. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your questions. Again, definitely feel free to reach out to us in any way if there's anything else you think of after the webinar. Guys, our presenters, Dennis, I want to say a big thank you to all of you. And if there aren't any departing questions or thoughts, I'll leave it there. All right, wonderful. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Stay safe.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Take care.